Call it decarbonization, call it adaptation and resilience, call it human development, call it general development. What are we striving for? At the end of the day, we're striving for equality of life and high quality of living for everybody, right? So call it, we've created so many terminologies that can sometimes create the silos and break the gaps and all of that. But to say that Africa's priority is development, so we might not want to invest heavily in climate. Well, what is development in that sense? The biggest need, energy, for instance, is one of the biggest needs, the deficit for the continent. Climate justice to me is a complex understanding. It starts with understanding that there are communities and people in this world who are just not feeling the impacts of climate change, but there are so many inequalities that existed, and climate change is making that worse. And how do we make sure that as we think about climate solutions, we are thinking about supporting those communities and those individuals, not just to protect them from the climate issue, but also to tackle the underlying inequalities that were already existing before climate. Climate justice is also a finance issue. It's a finance issue because the economics of the world we live in right now is not favorable to the very people who are going through these inequalities and these climate impacts. And they are not trusted with resources. If we really want to achieve justice, it will mean that we need to trust resources in the hands of those communities and those individuals, and make sure that they have the resources they need to be able to protect themselves and to be able to support in building the future that they want. Climate justice to me is also about leadership. This practically means that supporting people in the global south, supporting people with disabilities, supporting people who are queer, supporting people who are BIPOC, supporting indigenous communities to be leaders in several fields that they work, so that their lived experiences can guide the work within those fields. Justice cuts across all of these elements. I would say yes and no. And I say that for several reasons. Yes, because those international meetings, create a space that sort of level the ground to get everyone to be on the table, to have a conversation about what we need to move forward. Now, that is valuable, and I say no because while that space is created and everyone can enter through that door and sit, there's still a huge power imbalance. The power dynamics in those rooms make it very difficult for voices to be heard at the same way as compared to others. Indigenous communities are getting about 1%. Young people, we are getting only 0.76% of all climate philanthropy, even though they're given a seat at the table, even though they're invited into the room, even though their voices are being surfaced, but are they being heard, and are they being given the trust that it deserves? If you look at IPCC as a community, how many Global South researchers are there? Call it decarbonization, call it adaptation and resilience, call it human development, call it general development. What are we striving for? At the end of the day, we're striving for equality of life and high quality of living for everybody, right? So call it, we've created so many terminologies that can sometimes create the silos and break the gaps and all of that. But to say that Africa's priority is development, so we might not want to invest heavily in climate. Well, what is development in that sense? The biggest need, energy, for instance, is one of the biggest needs, the deficit for the continent. Well, if that is not a climate issue, I don't know what else is a climate issue, right? It's about how do we intersectionally and cohesively think about development for people that really address the root issues, which is the economic context we have now is not developed, it's not built to support regions like Africa. The economic model we have now is designed to keep continents and regions like that in debt consistently. It's not designed to maximize the raw materials and natural resources they have. Yes, the continent needs a lot of investment to be able to respond to climate disasters and climate risk. At the same time, it needs to close that energy deficit gap because that is important. At the same time, it has the biggest youth population the world has, And very soon, right, every 9 out of 10 people, young people, is going to probably be from the continent, right, by 2050. How do you ensure that that workforce and those talents on that continent can be built, invested in, and developed, not just for the climate crisis, but for everything that we need for the future? How do we build equality? How do we build quality life for everybody? You can't bring formal solutions into an informal economy and expect it to be a fit. It doesn't work. So really training local talents to be able to deliver solutions that are there is going to be fundamental. And then secondly, one of the biggest assets we have is our human capital and our resources as a continent. There's human resource, human capital, and then the natural resources we have. And historically, we've been kept in the very bottom of the value chain when it comes to these resources. So our role is to mine, extract, and give it away, and buy it back, right? And it doesn't support the local economy to grow, right? And a good statistics is, for instance, even if you look at a built environment, 16% of the built environment in Africa are done by Africans. The remaining 84% are all foreign companies building, right? And that takes away the jobs, it takes away all the economic benefit that you could retain locally. These are the hardcore issues that we need to start looking at. And it's not necessarily climate, right? These are just about people, economy, the real economy that people need to have to be able to see the economic liberation that a continent needs. I think that typically when we think about solutions and innovation, and I'll focus on innovation a little bit here, because a lot of people think about innovation from a very tech perspective. Africa as a continent, and a lot of young people and a lot of entrepreneurs I know are, very, very smart, very sharp, and they have a lot of innovations that are tech oriented. But some of the innovations that do not get attention are system human innovation. And one good example that I have, which won the Earthshot Prize last year, was the Green Africa Youth Organization had a project called Zero Waste Cities. When you think of cities and you think about waste management, it's one of the biggest challenges cities have all around the world. There are companies, registered formal companies, that take care of waste. But the majority of the waste are collected by individual waste pickers or waste collectors, collective as a group. And they do not get as much attention to the work that they need and the role they play in that ecosystem. And what this project did was really thinking about what is the governance around waste at the city level, and how do we make sure that we can innovate that to get these informal waste workers to be part of that system, that they can contribute to city-wide strategy around clean air, around methane reduction, around plastic solutions. So while innovation could mean digital, tech, everything online, in other places innovation could simply mean changing how human systems are designed to be able to bring the voices who are neglected into a field, and then their lived experiences, their insight is going to help crack some of the big challenges we have. And it's going to really help cities and help communities to be able to offer the solutions that people are really looking forward to. And it's not always going to be the smart, educated people. It's sometimes going to be the unschooled people who have lived practical experiences to bring onto the table, respected, valued, to be able to create those solutions.